So here, these are the basic concepts. Before we jump into creating a virtual machine or creating storage accounts or network services or trying to jump into Active Directory and all that. Let's first understand some basic usage stuff anamata. Okay. So here we will be looking at what is a subscription, what is a resource group, and what is a resource. So subscription is something where you will have it's a billing account. So it will hold, it contains set of resource groups in simpler fashion, and equally it contains set of resources. But before you create any resource, uh, before you create any resource in Azure or resource group in Azure cloud, Azure is expecting from you, Microsoft Azure is expecting from you to have a billing account. They are not sure where they can be charged you. So because before they charge you, before you actually create any service instance, what do I mean service instance? Service is something, and machine, virtual machine is a service. Storage account is a service. So before you try creating or provisioning any service instance, they expect to have a billing account for yourself where they can charge you for what you're creating, what you're using. And that's why uh, this has resources and it has resource groups, but end of the day, if it doesn't have a billing account, then it won't be a subscription. Okay, so billing subscription is something which holds this set of resources and resource groups, but in a whole, it is it's something where you charge for it. So a user can have multiple subscriptions. So what does it mean? In Azure Cloud, when you're trying to open an free trial account and everything, along with that, one of the other things which you can actually uh, can think of is you can open multiple subscription accounts. And how do we do that? And how do we search for that? We'll even look at that one. Once I complete this, we can have multiple accounts and multiple subscription billing accounts. And subscription level uh, is mapped to subscription mapped to tenant. So you can hold multiple Active Directory tenants under multiple Active Directory tenants. Each tenant you can hold multiple subscription accounts. And there is no specific reason why that this is mapped specifically in this way, but a simple logical thing. Active Directory is something where a set of users will be holded, and so the specific set of users will be having access to set of subscriptions. Now, if you are trying to shift to a different tenant, you are going to a different set of users. So because of that, you will have to have the set of subscriptions for that users also. So if you are giving access to that tenant this subscriptions, then they can actually also uh, have an access. But I'll show you right now how do that subscriptions will look like. So here, when you start searching for subscriptions, you will find one. And right now, I have a pay-as-you-go model currently. But if you are trying to create a free trial account for yourself, you will be seeing a free trial here with the name free trial. Pay-as-you-go means that it is actually mm, utilized for how much ever you are using, they will be charging accordingly. So there are different types of subscriptions in Azure. You will also see when you're in your organizations, you might see some subscriptions with enterprise agreement, and some subscriptions will have a student based tier agreement and all that. So some will have uh, the Microsoft even provides for set of research purpose and everything, and they have been named in a different one. So nothing's not, no need to know everything, but I wanted to say that you might see subscription names like enterprise agreement, pay as you go, and free trial, and all the subscription types. Uh, and there is a difference. Free trial is only for 1 month, and you'll have a $200 credit. That is nothing but 14,000 rupees in Indian currency. And whereas pay as you go, you will be charging enterprise agreement. You will have an effective pricing comparatively pay as you go. Pay as you go will have higher prices. But enterprise agreement, it is they will bring a consolidation prices. The organize the subscription which they have are being using for an enterprise point of view, and they're using a lot. Those kind of subscriptions will be end of the day having too many types of resources, different types of resources and everything. Now, what I wanted to say, this is actually coming under one tenant. Now, what does a tenant? This is an Azure Active Directory. I jumped into Azure Active Directory, and the tenant domain is this is the one. So this domain, all the users in this domain, whoever I gave access to the subscription, will be the only people who will be seeing this. And if I can keep adding multiple tenants when I click on manage tenants, and tenants is nothing but you're creating a domain name. That's it. So in your organization, when you are trying to create a tenant name and everything, you actually the domain name and everything. You usually choose your company domain name. Like in reality, if you see there are like multiple MNCs, right? And if you go and ask any of their users what is their email ID of their official email ID, they will have an employee ID or their employee name at the rate the domain company name .com, right? So you go with Infosys, they'll have Infosys.com, Wipro.com, like that. Now that is how the domain names will be written. And so everyone can write it. No, we have to go and validate. So if you wanted to create if you wanted to use someone's domain name, unless you have you purchase it in GoDaddy or any in Azure or everything. Sorry, in AWS you can't purchase in domain names in Azure yet, but in AWS you can purchase the domain names. So if you are trying to purchase and you have access, then you will be in a you can fetch that you have to verify your account and everything. Once that is done, tenant will be activated. It means that whenever in this tenants, the Active Directory tenants, you are creating users, they will be carrying with the email ID along with it. Suppose there is user at one at the rate VRK solutions dot on Microsoft.com. So here, if you see, there will be a user. So there is an ADO user one. So if you see ADO user one, the domain name which is already provided by default by Azure. That's why it is on Microsoft.com. But you create users, and the domain name will be appended to it as an email ID. Now, what I wanted to say is, under one tenant, you will have multiple subscriptions, so that you can assign these users in that specific tenant the access to that subscriptions whichever is there. Now, how can you create one more? You can add, and when you're adding one more subscription here, it's going to ask you. So it's going to first check whether you have a free trial access, and if you don't have it, now it will jump into asking provide your credit card details and everything. Now, once you provide your credit card details and everything, you will be in a position to have another subscription. So can the question here is, can I use the same credit card to create one more account? Yes, you can do it, but you can't create a free trial account. Okay. Why do we? So the next question is, why do we need multiple subscriptions? The reason is we need multiple subscriptions so that we can segregate the billing. Probably one subscription we are using for development purpose. What is development purpose? We wanted to actually first develop the functionality of the application and everything, and the developers in our organization are using set of virtual machines and services, and they wanted to really test in not test, they wanted to create the software, the application, and work functionally to be working. They wanted this one. So how much is billing happening for that? So we might that is something a company ourselves have to bear for it, because we are the ones who are developing it, or the company or the client for whom we are developing will be okay with this much is the budget I will be assigning for a development purpose. More than this, I will not be in a position to shell out money for development of this. So for the usage of subscription, that's how some agreements will take place. And the other subscription you will be using for testing. So once you have developed everything, you will send it to a non-prod or QA environment, and the client will wanted to perform their testing like pen testing and UAT testing. So there are different types of testings, automated testing and unit testing and lot of things. So they wanted to test that in the QA environment or a non-prod environment. And everything is working good and it is following all the things. And they're confident that the service won't go down. That is when they will shift it, they'll shift the entire application to production. Now, in production, you wanted to have it, the resources which are being provisioned in an so production. You wanted a different billing account, so you will use a different subscription. So entire these things can come under one single tenant. Okay. Or otherwise, if there are different, uh, suppose client is saying that, see, internally use your own subscription for development purpose, but this is the budget we will be allocating every month for you. Okay, for you developing this one. And for our organization, I'll give specifically access for my non-prod and prod environment for your team, whoever is developing this application and testing it and doing it. I'll separately, everyone has to go and log into their VDI virtual desktops. And from there, you wanted to provide. Probably the clients will have to register this each of the specific team into their domain names. Okay. They'll have an Active Directory server, not an Azure Active Directory. A Active Directory is meant to hold the users and everything. Okay. So this is where the that set of you have to log in with that credentials and have to access the subscriptions. Okay, unless if they give a specific your users are being added as guest users and everything, they can't give subscription access. There are ways to provide a user. So even if you are having what do I say here? So you are also a user in Azure portal. I can actually invite you as my as a guest user to my account, and with your credentials, you can access the subscription. You can do that. This will concepts will be coming further out of it, but I wanted to say subscription is something which is actually as an account building point of view, we'll have a different accounts and everything. So unless you create a you use an credit card and stuff, it is not possible. You so it is not possible with debit card savings account. You can create a subscription only with a credit card. And next one is uh, which I wanted to show you is What is the point of contains? So here I mentioned that it contains set of resource groups that contains resources. So subscription is something under a tenant. You will have can have multiple billing accounts. Everywhere there is a limit, but the point is under the subscription you can have resource groups, and under each resource group you can have uh, resources. Can have some number of resources. Every limit is there. Number of resource groups you can create and resources you can create, subscriptions you can create, and each service instances you can create. We'll look into that one later on. So this is, so if I start writing under a tenant, you will try creating subscriptions. Subscription 1, 2, and similarly each subscription can have multiple resource groups, and resource groups, under resource groups you'll have resources. What is the point of having a resource group? Okay, so we'll jump into understanding what is resource group here. What is the point of having a resource group? The naming convention itself is saying grouping the resources in one place. So you'll create a group. While creating a group in Azure, it will ask you in which region you wanted to create. Okay, and it contains set of resources. So here, few things which you have to know is it is not region specific. What does that mean? It means that when you are creating resources, it doesn't mean that the resource group, whichever is that resource, no need to be in the same region. The resource group while you're creating, you might select as a specific region like East US as an example. In East US location, there is an Azure data center and you are creating a resource group. But resource group is a logical container of grouping the resources only. It's a logical container. And holding resources. So that's the reason why, as it is a logical container, it is just a region, and it's not a region specific. It means that resources can be of different region. Group of resources in a resource group can be of different region. And what is a resource? A resource is you are creating an instance of a service. So if you wanted a virtual machine, you are creating a virtual machine. It is a resource. And but while you're creating, it is mandatory to specify which region. Mandatory. You give a name for the resource. That we is give a name and region and resource group. So without you providing which region you wanted, where you wanted to create a resource, and in which resource group are you placing this resource. It is not possible to create a resource. Okay, you can't create a resource without a resource group, and you can't create a resource group without a subscription. You can't create a subscription without having a billing account, which is credit card. And before you creating a subscription, you should have a tenant where you hold the Azure Active. So I just still didn't cover the Azure Active Directory entirely. That's the reason why I'm still storing it behind the scenes. I'll be coming to that Azure Active Directory in a few more minutes, but this is it. So a resource should have a name mandatorily, and it should have a region, and resource it should contain which resource group it is, and it is region specific. Why it is region specific? Because resource is something is actually existing in an Azure point of view. You're creating somewhere that service. So it is every resources which you're creating, end of the day, is nothing but you're choosing. So if I go into services, we have different services in Azure. Suppose I go with a virtual machine, and I have right now one virtual machine with me, and that is this is becomes a resource. And what type of resource it is? It's a virtual machine. Now, when I create, suppose I create any resource, uh, I'm just choosing virtual machine, but you can actually go here to all resources, and you can see the list of resources. Different types are there, but all these are the resources which are there in the subscription. If I go and click on create, it's going to ask me which service instance are you going to. Is it a virtual machine, or do you want it to provision a Kubernetes service? Do you want it to create a database, or do you want it to create a SQL database, or this Cosmos database for NoSQL? This is storage account, or do you want it to create an web application web service, and you wanted to store key secret management. So different services which are there, and when you're creating any of it, okay, there are different services in Azure, but if you are creating anything of it, that means that you are creating a resource in Azure. And while you're creating it, you have to mention, suppose I'm creating a virtual machine. Anything you choose, either if it's a storage account or anything, it's mandatory to first provide the subscription. If you don't have a subscription, you can't be in a position to choose this and create it. So unless this is there, you can't be in a position to create it. And after you are selecting which subscription it is. So as I said right previously, you might have multiple subscriptions. You can create multiple subscriptions. So here in the drop down, you can select subscription in which you wanted to create a virtual machine, and mandatory every resource needs a resource group. If you don't you see the star marks, it means that it is mandatory. If you don't give the resource group name, it will not create this virtual machine. So then right now you're seeing all the resources, right? Let me show that even. You are seeing all the resources here, and that comes under resource group name called machines-rg. I hope there are no confusions in this. So this I'm grouping these resources under two resource groups. One is machines-rg and one is network watcher rg. So if I go back to home and I specifically look for resource groups, I'll have three resource groups. One is test-rg, one is network watcher rg, one is machines-rg. This resource group doesn't have any resources, but this group one has a network watcher in this, and this one is having set of resources. You right now no need to worry about what is a virtual network, what is a virtual machine, and all that. But if you see, a resource group is a logical container which is holding a group of resources. It can be of same region, or it can hold resources of different region also. Okay, but resources, when you're creating a virtual machine, when you're creating, this is residing in East US. When you're creating a virtual machine, or you're creating a virtual network, or any service you're trying to use, and you're creating an instance of it, it is actually being created behind the scenes in Azure data center. And that data center are in different regions. See, they can't create one data center for entirely in the world access scale. Instead of it, they are creating different regions here. They are holding in central India one place. They're also holding a data center in South India. They're holding another data center in East US. Why? Because that specific region, whoever wants to use Azure cloud, they are trying to give them service with a lower latency and with a higher efficient manners. They created in across the world different data centers. So right now Azure is holding almost some 60 plus regions, 59 plus 58 plus regions. During my time while I was learning Azure, I was seeing only around 48, 50, 40 data centers around. But till if you see, the regions are have been increased and it will keep increasing. What is the point of keep increasing? They have more number of customers. They wanted to service more and with a faster performance and efficiency and a lower latency. So they create more number of data centers across different regions where that regions users can actually access it. So while you're creating a virtual machine, end of the day it is going to one specific location. Here, if you see in East US, under an East US data center, I am going and creating a virtual machine. So that is the why that virtual machine will be there in East US, not in West US or Central India or Asia or Japan or Germany as such. It will be only in US. So if I create another virtual machine in Germany or Asia or Central India or something, it will be in that specific location. Okay, but I can create the machines under one resource group alone. Let me ask pause the record and yeah. So what is the need of a region while creating or provisioning an Azure service or an instance is because of that. Okay, we just answered that. The main reason for creating for the need of a specific region is either for because of a performance or compliance reasons or because of latency. So you segregate when you're running a website. Suppose assuming that you're running a website or a database and everything, you create the services in that specific region wherever the customers are. So for you, if there are people who are in US who are accessing your website, then you can, if you wanted to create a separate server you can create it in US so that the requests which are coming will end of the day go into that specific machine where it is running in US region. So the latency will be easier for you, lesser latency, lower latency for US customers. Similarly, for Indian customers, you can create the machines in virtual machines in India so that the latency will be lesser. And compliance reason I just mentioned it. So all these reasons, there are many reasons. So it is based on the customer needs. Then you will say that in these regions we are going to create the service and everything. So you're not the person who will be deciding it. There will be people, architects, and the stakeholders of the project who will be deciding in which regions we wanted to hold uh, uh, the services and everything. But while you're creating, just it is saying I created being in India, I created resources in virtual machine. So there will be no huge trouble. But when you're trying to run websites with millions of customers and everything, latency plays a very huge role. And now let's get into what is an Azure service. See, all the while we spoke about resources, right? Or in instances, we are creating a virtual machine. Now, when I'm creating a virtual machine, the virtual machine is a service here. Okay. This VM01 is not a service, this virtual machine. So I can create under a service number of instances. I can create VM02, VM03, VM1000, VM2000 and all that. So I can create lot of virtual machines. I'm using a service called virtual machines, and you can actually go under all services here, and here you see categories. There are different category of services which Azure is providing. So if you wanted to create a storage account where you can store data, if you wanted to have backups place, you would store, create recovery service vault. You wanted to create database like MySQL, MariaDB, SQL, Microsoft SQL, and all that, you can create databases here. So these are all services. Cosmos DB is a service where this service actually provides what is the use of this service. If a user wants to use, they can store NoSQL data. Right? They are aware you wanted to have data be across the world in one place so that the number of read and write operations which can happen on a Cosmos DB concurrently is much way faster compared to normal databases. They each database provides set of kind of features. Just now I mentioned. It's okay that you haven't understood what this I meant in terms of concurrent read and write operations and everything. That's fine. But what I wanted to say, every service will have unique features. Now, if you're going with a virtual machine, it's actually having a unique feature, and which will make if you are so we'll talk about some basic services as in this cloud. So but we are in this Azure administration point of view, we'll not be in a position to cover entire services. We'll go in depth about one specific service like virtual machine and end to end covering the documentation point of view. We'll cover a lot of scenarios so you'll understand when we take a service how much deeper do we have to deep dive into. And then we will talk about some functionality, some services like app service, which is important. And we'll talk about availability sets and something. And equally in networking, we'll talk about few services. Yes, in networking, we'll cover majority of the services. At least I'm confident that in this course, we'll be at least covering more than 60% to 70% of the, not, I believe more than that. I think that right now, if you see, there are 30 services, and that I think we'll be at least covering some 20 services or around like that. So in storage, we'll gonna cover some few services, primarily the first three, and then in database, we'll cover one of the database, which is a SQL database and MySQL servers. And then we'll talk about identity, which is Active Directory. We'll talk about Azure Active Directory. And in terms of monitoring, we'll talk about Azure Monitor and Log Analytics Workspace, App Insights. And we have one more, Azure Monitor, Log Analytics Workspace. Yeah, I think we are good as of now with this. So this is what services. So each thing you can go and create an instance of it that becomes a resource in Azure. So why do we call an instance and why do we call a resource? See, understand in terms of subscription and resource groups, why do we have this kind of naming convention in place? So when you're talking in terms of multiple accounts and everything, so they'll ask you how many you wanted to know when you wanted it's not a small amount, right? You will be charged too much when you're having 1,000 virtual machines. Your billing account just goes for lakhs. You pay lakhs of rupees as a rent every month. When you're trying to do, you wanted to understand how many resource types of are being there in each uh, subscription, or and how many resources are there under each resource type. Do we really are we using it effectively? Who are you? So can we bring down the cost? All this kind of things will be there as a subscription management. So in terms of a subscription point of view, and account point of view and all that. Resource groups is nothing but a logical container of resources, and resources are nothing but the instance of a service. So whichever service instance you're trying to create, instance is VM01 is an instance of virtual machine. Storage account 1 is a instance of storage account service, like that. So that is what is an Azure service. You go and everything, but end of the day, if you wanted to create an instance, that is a resource. What is it? You need to have a billing account. You need to have a resource group name and which region you wanted to create that. Okay. So in all regions, you will not be in a position to create all service instances. Why? In that region might be still they wouldn't have activated few of the uh, services. So when they create a region, Azure creates a region, data center. When I say region, they create a data center. They first run the level one services, and here those level one are actually Microsoft SQL, MySQL, data virtual machines, or like that. In each category, there will be level one services primarily have to be utilized, uh, and those you will be seeing. Like suppose you might not be searching some Postgres databases, Postgres server databases to be created under some specific region because they are not been yet been as provisioned as a service in that region. Okay, so if you see anything like in this region it is not available and everything, it means that that region is not been a position to get provided. And if you are using a free trial account, you have too many limitations in which regions you have to create and how much of VMC or configuration you wanted. It will be a limited only because it's a free trial account. So if you shift to a pay as you go, even you will have a bit limitations, but still you can go and request for it and they will increase your limitation capacity. And let's get into the most important topic, which is Active Directory. Before I jump into it, let me ask you guys. I'll pause the recording. Now let's understand what is an Active Directory. See, this is very important. Active Directory is a service which is provided by Azure, and it is a location. It's a service where you can have set of users and you give access to them. So whatever usually what happens in terms of when you provide a username and password when you're trying to log in, you are authenticating yourself and you are authorizing yourself. So an authentication and authorization topics will be there. So here we maintain the users, and that's nothing but under the category of identity. Uh, you're creating users and you'll give specific access to each of these people. Okay, what type of access they need and everything. So you see administrator here, and this is a very important topics, guys. Azure Active Administration is something you need to really have a broader picture on. So it is a service which is provided by Azure to ensure that your authentication is in set in place. So you can access Active Directories in your organization. If you go into an organization point of view, they won't give an access to to the Active Directory and all that, only to a limited set of individuals whoever are responsible in terms of maintaining the Azure Active Directory. Only those people they will be giving access to. So you can create the users, you can delete users and all that. And you in terms of whatever services they are being utilized, you wanted to connect to third party services or in the services and everything, you use this Active Directory and specifically app registrations and enterprise applications so that the users, whoever are being part of that Active Directory, can use it. So you go and specifically mention this, people can use it. And if you have an Active Directory in on-prem, you can use Azure AD Connect to connect the on-prem to the Azure AD. What is an Active Directory? Active Directory is a service, not just in Azure. It's by Microsoft Active Directory. is where you actually store the users and all that, and which users to have access to what and everything. So previously, if you have worked or if you have seen, there will be thousands of desktops in the cabins and everything, office cabins, and there will be the UOS which will be installed in it, and anyone can probably log in with their credentials, and automatically they'll be in a position to use that desktop. Now, when that is happening, the OS will be a different type. It is a data center OS, which can serve multi users and everything. But end of the day, uh, if you are you an administrator or you an user depends on the credentials you're providing, and entirely that will be accessed from Active Directory point of view. So you might be, so if you see in that kind of desktops, you will not be in a position to install whatever softwares you wanted. Only system administrators have to come. You might have to raise a request, or you might have to call out your administrator, system administrator, and then they will provide their credentials, and that is happening because of Active Directory. Active Directory is deciding these are the administrators and this. So how it is deciding itself? No, you will go into act. The people who are using Active Directory as an for the administration point of view, everything, they will go and say these are the users who are administrators. Automatically, when they are being connected to that same network where the Active Directory is and everything, the authentication and authorization happens accordingly. So this is we have a brief about it, Active Directory, but as of now, uh, simple an Azure Active Directory has a tenant, and it's very important. You will have a tenant ID, and the domain name. You can create domain names you wanted. If you have your website, you can go and verify. Suppose I just created a vrksolutions.com, but if you see it is not yet available state, I have to go to my GoDaddy and account and have to validate this with this record. And automatically, once I click verify and I gave this records stored that in the GoDaddy account where I hold this vrksolutions.com domain, so automatically that will be verified and it will be available. What does it mean available? So whenever I'm creating users, I can create users with that. So I create a user. I can choose that domain name because I'm not able to see right now a domain name because it's not yet in available state. vrksolutions.com. I right now only see one because it is the only one which is available at this point. And why? How did I get this? By default, whenever you're creating an Azure account, you will be having in your organization point of view also, you will find a domain name. How? Because you are being added as an user in you're created as an user, so obviously you will be given, and you will not be given entire access to subscriptions. Might be only to a specific resource group or to a specific set of resources. You might have a purpose in that organization. You are a monitoring team, or you are an operations team, or you are an administrator, or you are a person who have to give access to other individuals. You only have to check in terms of monitoring logs. So you will only have permissions to check the logs and everything like that. So it based on the purpose of your hire and your organizational requirement, you will be holding different access. We will deep dive later on that. What are the types of access and all that? How do we provide an access? That will be coming further discussion. But the whole point is this is what an Active Directory is meant for, holding the users to ensure the authentication is happening in place and authorization is happening in place. Now, what is a region and a zone? Region is something where you have a single data center. Zone is in that location, that specific geographical location. Suppose I take a region here as East US, and this is actually a zone What does that mean? In one specific geographical location called East US, I have three data centers, and it provides more reliability when instead of one single data center. Why? What if one single you are running a website? Okay, you are running it in one single you're saying in a region where it has only one data center, and you set up your website in a way that in that specific data center you created all the virtual machines. What if the region would have went down? Your entire machines will go down that point of time. You don't want your service to go down irrespective of situation. So when a data center failure happens, you can have another data center point of view in availability zone and all that. If you have a regional failure, then you have to create your services in different regions so that at least you have a backup region to provide the service. But if you have a data center failure, you have another data center in a zone point of view. A zone contains three data centers, and a region contains only a single data center. Now, how can I differentiate which data center, which is a region and which is a zone? Unfortunately, at this point of time, only way is going and checking. You will get to know. So there are you can go and explore the globe, which will give you an UI of a globe, which will where you can point out which are the regions and everything. But here, regions and availability zones. So these are like this is a region. See, one single data center. This is a zone. You have three data centers. It means that three different buildings. Yeah, which contains different data centers, but they're connected in common network. Now, if you see Azure regions with availability zones, these are the ones. So in India, we have Central India. If you go to Asia, we have Central India as an availability zone. So availability zone will have more service offerings mandatorily than compared to a region, because regions are still coming out. But definitely in future, you will see most of the regions to become as a availability zones. What does that mean? You are expanding. If you are in Azure, Microsoft Azure, as of now, you didn't create different data centers because you wanted to first increase the number of hardware in a specific location wherever customers are more needed. Suppose tomorrow we have right now in central India, and you also seen West India and India and South India. Now tomorrow when there are a lot of users in the West India and South India, you will see those regions to become as an availability zones. Okay, so they become like zones which will have more data center. They're having more data centers. And at this point of time, there are three data centers in a zone. You will not be finding more data centers at this point of time. Probably in future, they might spike it to five and all that, but that's not our decision. I didn't see at this point of time five availability zones. Usually, we are seeing only three data centers. So that's the difference between a region and a zone. And how many regions are there? It's an increasing one. So you can go and see how many regions are there. Okay, so you can actually go to the globe and you can see this. Azure is available and coming soon in all of these regions. Okay, we have even these regions, but there are some regions data centers are used only for government purpose. So there are Azure government regions specifically used for government purposes. They use a dedicated hardware for government usage. So even governments will actually use, if you know, AWS are being used by certain set of governments like government CIA like that, all that. So they give a dedicated hardware for the governments. and a different data center entirely. So you might even see the kind of projects. So these are the ones. So let me pause the recording.